Joining us. All right, we have folks trickling in slowly. We'll give it a minute for other folks that are not here yet because we got a lot of folks that registered. In the meanwhile, it would be nice to know where are you guys joining this podcast from. We always love to see how much the reach has been for our platform. So go ahead and type here, please. We would love to know what areas are you guys located. California, the first one. Soumya, welcome. Thank you. And both of our speakers are also from Northern California. Something to do with California. Maybe the reach in California is higher for us. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 together. Wow. California is taking over. Thank you, guys. I hope we'll have participation from other states as well. Looks like it's California dominant podcast this morning. Feeling left out here. I'm from Arizona. Cool, cool. Good morning, everybody. So far, majority of you guys are in California, so it's still morning for all of us. And thank you, Alap and Vishnu, for joining us and taking this time specifically for all our gratitude users. With that said, it's 2 minutes past our podcast time. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. This is the podcast hosted by GradAchiever in partnership with AdmitMate. We have two speakers here who are doing the second podcast with us. The first one would be Alap. He's the sophomore in Stanford. And then we have Vishnu, who is also a sophomore in University of Chicago. And the topic for this podcast is all going to be all about essays because the two accomplished sophomores here have gone through this journey, and as they can pursue their undergrad, it has become, I think, one of their aim to also take others along with them. With that being in mind, they have gone ahead and founded their own company called AdmitMate, which is focused on providing the mentorship for students that would need to get that headway into the college readiness. With that said, I'm not going to be taking too much time to talk about them. I will now hand it over so that Alap and Vishnu can introduce themselves and then get right into all about college rubrics, application, and what goes inside the admission officer's mind. So take over, please, Vishnu and Alap.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that intro. And yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join this podcast. My name is Alap Hegde, and I'm currently a rising sophomore at Stanford studying computer science and economics.
And I'm Vishnu, and I'm an incoming sophomore at the University of Chicago studying physics and math.
And we're especially excited for this webinar because it's going to be slightly different from the ones you've seen in the past. In this webinar, we're obviously going to give a lot of informational content as well, especially inside the minds of an admissions officer. But at the end of the webinar, we hope to explain to you the why, as in why specific things that you've heard from your friends, from your peers actually matter. And I'm sure as parents, as parents and students, you guys have a ton of conflicting advice. I know me and my parents did when we went through the whole admissions process. And the whole point of this webinar is to understand what actually goes on behind the scenes. As university students, we're actually able to view our admissions file, the actual file that the admissions officer graded to let us into the school. And we're going to go behind the scenes of an admissions committee and understand all the specific criteria you have to go through. And the ultimate goal for this is after this webinar, you'll be able to basically pick apart all the advice you're getting from other people, figure out which ones are actually applicable to you and your child, and why it matters in the long term. So here's a little bit of our agenda. First, I'm going to briefly talk about AdmitMate, the company me and Vishnu started. And the reason why I want to do this as the start is because I want to emphasize the student perspective. Everything that you're going to hear from now on forward is from our own perspectives as high school students and current college undergrads. And so it may be slightly different from what you've heard from older admissions counselors. The next part, which I think is really cool, is I'm going to be talking about the admissions committee. As parents and students, we generally start thinking from the time we start our extracurriculars to ultimately the time we submit our applications. But what exactly happens after that? Who reads your application first? What all steps does it go through? And that's something that is different for each school, but that's something that's very, very impactful and insightful on when you actually develop your profile. And this is going to be Stanford specific. The next thing is the Stanford admissions file breakdown. Like I said at the start, as students were actually able to see the rubric that they graded us on and see the notes they took, the scores that we got, and things that stood out and pretty much helped us get into any university. And this is not just Stanford specific. At any university, you can read your admissions file. So I want to break it down and explain the actual rubric that Stanford uses to evaluate its students. And the last part is just a recap and questions. I'm going to go over everything we talked about, and we're pretty much going to open the floor to Q&A.
Yeah, and so just to summarize that, what we're doing here is we are going to help you reverse engineer the admissions process. If you know how you're going to be evaluated when your application is submitted, then that'll give you a head start on forming your application in a way that is favorable to the colleges. So in that way, we're going to help you reverse engineer the admissions process.
Exactly. So a little bit about AdmitMate. Our philosophy is simple. We match current high school students with Ivy Plus undergrads who share your major goals and interests for a very personalized mentorship experience. And we genuinely believe that you can get into your dream school from tailored guidance from those who have done it themselves. And I think there are a few main advantages, let's say, for working with a student. And the first one is all the advice you're going to be getting is experience-based. The mentor we match you with is just 2 to 3 years older than you, and they've done the exact same projects you want to do. If you're a computer science major, we're going to match you with someone who's done a lot of AI data science projects. If you're a pre-med, we're going to match you with someone who's done a lot of chemistry and biology research, things like that. And the advice you're getting, it's not just things that generally seem to work. It's really specific things that have worked for your mentor. The next one, which I think is the most important part, is that it's major specific advice as well. Generally, when you approach college counseling or surrounding your child with the right infrastructure, you generally move to a counselor, right? And my parents were first-generation immigrants. They grew up in India, and India was completely different. You do the JD test, and you get matched to a school. Here, it's a lot more holistic, right? And so there was a lot of trial and error. I was the first-born child. I was the guinea pig. And so what a lot of counselors were able to help with was actually explaining the admissions process to me. Why does the SAT matter? What GPA should I be aiming for? Which courses should I take? That stuff, extremely helpful. And that stuff a counselor can provide. The problem then was once we created these extracurriculars, how do I actually build them out? The stuff you learn in school, just like the stuff you learn in college, is going to be very different from the things you're actually going to be doing on a job, right? So the Python, the Java I'm learning in school is, yes, great and all, but it's not really going to help me build a web app per se. So how do I actually get started with it? And so the college counselors send you to research specialists. If you want to write some research paper, they'll send you to organizations like Collegians. If you want to start a nonprofit, maybe they'll send you to Lumiere. And so you're working with a counselor, and then you're working with a specific project specialist, and you're working with multiple of these specialists to create your profile. That's good and all, but it turned out to be very expensive for us just because you have to pay for a lot of these individual services. But more importantly, you want to build a theme with the application. I'll talk about why the theme is so important in just a second. But instead of having all these different things, we wanted to basically create a one-stop shop where you can get all the admissions advice and major specific advice from somebody who's done it themselves. And the last part, which I think is pretty neat as well, is you can literally skip the trial and error. The hardest part about doing any project is obviously coming up with the idea, but doing the first steps. If you want to start a nonprofit, how do you file for 501c3 status? If you want to do a machine learning project, where are you going to get all the data from? Which models are you going to use? You can skip the trial and error if you work with somebody who's done the projects themselves. They're literally going to tell you, if you want to do this project, do this, this, and this. It worked for me because I've done it in the past. And that's a general gist of AdmitMate. And I'll go talk a little bit more about the specifics. So this part is my favorite part, the admissions committee. Who all reads your application from the time you submit it to the time you ultimately get accepted? And there's 4 major steps. The first one is your regional subreaders. Like I said at the start, your admissions is contextualized by your location, the school you go to, and the general area you're in. If a lot of you guys are from California, let's say from the Bay Area, you're going to be read by the Bay Area regional subreaders. And just a quick disclaimer, all these things I'm about to say, I know for a fact that's how Stanford does it. And a lot of schools are going to have some slight variations, but overall, this is how it works. So the first step, regional subreaders. 3 or 4 people, generally undergraduates, younger people, they're going to read your application and they're going to grade you on based on a specific rubric, which I'll talk about in just a second. And if you get a high enough score on that rubric, they send you to the committee head. Multiple regional subreaders, only one committee head. And you can actually find the committee head for each specific school with just a quick Google search. This committee head is the most important person. This is the one you want to convince. And your regional subreaders are going to send the rubric to your committee head. And the committee head is, again, going to read your essays, read your application, read the prior feedback from the subreaders. And if they really like you, this is the interesting part, they turn from your reviewer to ultimately your advocator. They're going to be the one you have to convince over to the one who's actually going to pitch you as a person to all the other committee heads. It's a little bit complicated. I'm going to go back a little bit. So first are the subreaders. Then if the subreaders like you, you go to the committee head. There are multiple, 50, 60 committee heads. If your specific regional committee head likes you, they're going to pitch you as a person to all the other committee heads. And if enough committee heads like you, you're going to ultimately get accepted. It's going to be a vote at the end of the day. So that's a little bit different than just 1 or 2 people reading your application, right? It's a whole path. And I think the biggest takeaway from this is, how do you stand out to your committee head? Because that's the person you want to impress. And the best way, to be honest, is having a theme across your application. They're only going to be reading your essays for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, right? Maybe 3 minutes on your whole application process. So if instead of having a bunch of different extracurriculars that are somewhat aligned, have a theme across your application. For me in high school, I loved cooking. And so I knew from a young age, cooking was going to be my theme. And every single extracurricular I did, it related to cooking in some way. Computer science and cooking, YouTube and cooking, working in a restaurant, things like that. So when the time came for the committee head to read my application, they were like, okay, it's very easy to remember this person. And more importantly, it's very easy to pitch this person to a bunch of different others. Does that make sense? And Vishnu,
Yeah, and so sort of just to clarify that, right? I want to use the analogy of reading a book. When you finish reading a book, you most likely don't remember all of the details of the book, right? What you remember more is the salient themes of the book. And think of your college application similarly to that book, right? The admissions officer is not going to remember how many hours you spent volunteering at a particular organization, how many research papers you published. All of these sorts of things are not
Sorry about that. Sorry, continue, Vishnu.
All of these things are not what is going to be the most impactful when these people turn into your advocators. What is going to be the most impactful is the theme that runs across your application, right? What makes you unique as a person? How are you different than all of the thousands of other applications that are sitting on their desk? And that is why the theme is important.
Absolutely. And so in the next part, remember how I said at the start, the first regional subreaders grade you on a rubric, and we can actually view the admissions file. Let's take a look at what the Stanford admissions file actually looks like. And so there's 6 main components, and I've bolded the most important ones, which I'll get to in just a second. The first one is your school-specific information. Every extracurricular, every test score, every word you write is going to be contextualized within the school you go to. You're going to be compared, unfortunately, against your peers, not against people across the country. And so the first thing that the school looks for is for some context. What is the highest possible GPA a student from your specific school can get? What is the average GPA? What all courses are offered? What is the general course rigor? And that's the first thing they look for. And they're going to contextualize everything you do from that point within this context. Second, one of the most important parts, obviously, your Stanford calculated GPA. And the reason why I say your school calculated GPA is that every school is going to view a different GPA than the one you send in. Every school, every high school some high schools have grade inflation, some high schools have grade deflation. It's very unpredictable, right? If you take an AP class for some schools, your weighted GPA is going to be 5 out of 5. Whereas if you take a non-AP class, it's going to be 4 out of 5, maybe 4.5 out of 5. It really depends per school, right? So Stanford and all these other schools are going to take your GPA, put it through an algorithm, and recalculate your GPA based on the way Stanford wants. And that's the first thing. There's no finessing your way around a bad GPA, right? Your GPA is the first thing that they're going to look through. The next part is test scores. This is your SAT, APs, things like that. And from sections 3, 4, 5, and 6, they're all going to be graded on a scale of 1 through 6. 1 being the most ideal applicant for any school, and 6 being maybe they're not a right fit for this specific school. And they're going to tally all these sections up, your test score, support, extracurriculars, intellectual vitality. They're going to sum up all these sections and then figure out an overall score for you. If you want to be admitted, you should aim for an overall score of 1 to 2. And if you have a score of like 5 or 6, maybe it's not the right fit for you. So going back to test scores, it's pretty much a validator of your GPA, right? If a student has a high GPA and high test scores, it means that they're pretty academically strong. That's pretty much it about test scores. I don't recommend stressing too much about them. Aim for a good SAT score, aim for a good AP scores, but there's a lot more things that you could spend your time on. The fourth part, support, eludes a lot of students and parents. And support is basically asking you, how is this student going to contribute to the campus, and how are they as a person? There are two main ways of viewing the support, right? One of them is obviously the essays. Through your essays, you can show your genuine side. You can show some authenticity about the person you are. But again, that's still easy to like sort of manipulate, change a little bit, right? So when I think of support, I think of letters of recommendation. And this is another huge tip for parents and students. Find a recommendation letter writer who actually understands you as a person. A huge mistake I see with all the students I work with is that they want to get rec letters from Stanford professors, from your computer science teachers, from a lot of these people who have, quote unquote, a lot of academic prestige. And to be honest, I don't think that matters that much. I think it's far more important to get a recommendation letter from somebody who actually knows you at the core, because they're going to be writing so many more unique things that no other person would be able to write. And I'll give an example of this. One of my really good friends at Stanford, he did research at Stanford in high school, Harvard. He did a bunch of different things. He knew a lot of top people. The person he asked for his recommendation letter was actually his school crossing guard. And it sounds kind of weird, right? You're going to submit an application to a top school and your school crossing guard is going to write your essay. But in reality, that's the most powerful thing you can do because they actually understand you as a person. The next thing is your extracurriculars and awards. And this is, to be honest, the most important part. How do you explore your interests in a way that's very interesting to college, in a way that's through academics? And that's what we here at AdmitMate believe in. Every extracurricular that we believe in should be something that combines your interest, whatever it can be, cooking, music, sports, and some kind of academics. We both firmly believe that the whole point of high school is not to get into a top university. It's not to have the highest GPA in your class. It's to figure out who you are as a person. And what better way to figure out who you are as a person than to exploring your extracurriculars? That being said, colleges want students who are very academically driven, right? So what's the happy medium? What's a way where you can have a really fun, fulfilling high school that doesn't involve sleeping at 2 a.m., that's actually very, gives you a lot of opportunities to learn while still impressing colleges? And that's what we call developing your spike, combining your academics with your extracurriculars, or combining your academics with your passions to stand out. And that's the biggest way that here at AdmitMate will help you. The next thing are awards, right? What kind of awards do you have, and do they complement your portfolio? And I'll be completely honest with you guys. You don't need a lot of awards, if any, to get into a top school. I have a lot of friends at Stanford who got a ton of awards, USACO, MOP, a lot of these top competitions. And there are people like me who got pretty much 0 awards. I had like 1 award that I put on my Common App. And this just goes to show it's a very holistic thing, right? If you don't have great awards, you can supplement them with the extracurriculars you do. And the awards ultimately are determined by the extracurriculars you do. For somebody like me who did a lot of cooking-related extracurriculars, it's hard to find awards that sort of supplement your profile, right? Whereas if you're doing a lot of technical computer science research, it's a lot easier to find these things. So we're going to help you build a profile that lets you work smarter, not harder, and sort of hits all these key checkpoints in a way that's really cool for admissions officers.
Yeah, and I see, actually, I'll finish up this slide.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't realize, and then we can answer some of the questions in the chat.
Absolutely. So sections 3, 4, and 5, very, very important. But section 6 is my favorite section, and it's sort of like the icing on the cake. This, I think, is Stanford specific, but a lot of schools are going to have some variation of this last prompt. Self-preservation and intellectual vitality, a word that you may or may not have heard before, but it's a word that, especially like at Stanford, they value a lot. I'll start with the first one. Self-preservation, self-presentation. How do you come across as a person? The best way for schools to gauge who you are as a person is obviously through rec letters, through your essays, but through alumni interviews as well. Once you apply to a lot of schools, mainly private schools, this is how it works. You'll apply to the school before you actually get any feedback on your application. You're going to get somebody reaching out to you, an alum from that school, and asking you for an interview. 100% take these interviews. These are very, very helpful. It's completely random. It's not like the best applications are going to get an interview, the worst aren't. It's completely random, right? That being said, the interview is the way where you could show off your depth of thinking. They're not going to ask you technical questions like if you're applying as a CS major, what is a depth first search or what is a binary tree? They're not going to care about those things. They're going to ask you, what do you look for in a good friend? How do you overcome failure? Things like that. Things that show who you are as a person. And that's the first part, self-preservation. The next thing is intellectual vitality. And I think this is one of the most important and underrated parts of your application. How do you think as a person? And that is pretty vague, so I'm going to break it down a little bit. But intellectual vitality is basically, it's an umbrella term encompassing how curious you are. Do you take things for granted? If you see a problem, are you the type to take initiative? Are you a naturally curious person? There's not one set definition, but I think intellectual vitality you can pretty much replace with curiosity in some sense. Are you a curious person who likes to learn? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a straight academic, but it means if you have a passion, how do you like learning about it? How do you like exploring deeper into it? And that's something that they really look for. And Vishnu, I think there's something you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to answer some of the questions that are coming in the chat. And the first question that I saw is, does every single college calculate your GPA differently? And yes, there are differences in how different colleges calculate your GPA. For example, Stanford doesn't take your freshman year into account when they're looking at your GPA. Most other schools do take your freshman year into account. The UCs, when they recalculate your GPA, they don't, they calculate like A minus and A plus all the same, right? So there's no difference between A minus, A, and A plus when they're calculating your GPA. And there are a bunch of other differences school by school. And then the second question that I saw in the chat was, how do you get a good recommendation letter from a school counselor, given that, you know, they're dealing with a lot of students at the same time, and many of their statements about you may seem copy-paste. And I would say the best way to do that is to actually go and meet with them and talk to them more often than the average student would, right? They're your school counselor. They are available to speak to you. You have to be proactive and talk to them throughout the course of your high school. You can't just cram everything in at the last minute, but you have to talk to them throughout the course of your high school so that they get a good feeling of you as a person. And then your recommendation letter really stands out from the rest of the pile that is really copy and paste. And the last question is, what GPA does Stanford expect you to have? And on this point, there's not really much you can say, because 50% of applicants to Stanford have a 4.0, and way more or way less than 50% get accepted, right? Stanford's acceptance rate is close to 1%. And so that means that there isn't really an expectation for GPA because of the fact that a lot of 4.0 students got rejected. And a little bit of context for Olaf and I, we were actually not, you know, in the top 10%, 5% of our class. We were more in like the top 25% of our high school class. And we still were able to make it into top schools. And the reason why is because college admissions in the United States is holistic, right? as long as you're showing that you're a strong student academically, you don't need to have a 4.0. You don't need to have a perfect GPA as long as the rest of your application is amazing, right? Because your GPA doesn't contribute to that application theme that we were talking about earlier. What you need to really have down pat is your extracurricular activities. And the rest of your portfolio that really contributes to that theme, that's a lot more important than your GPA, ultimately. As long as your GPA is relatively strong. If your GPA is not that strong, then it may be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. And just to sort of touch up on that as well, yeah, like Vishnu said, there's no direct answer, right? You compensate. If you have a lower GPA, you maybe want to showcase your extracurriculars more. If you have a really high GPA, your extracurriculars may go down. I genuinely think that the sweet spot, though, from my experience and people that I've seen, is anywhere between a 3.95 and a 4.0. Again, that depends on the school specifically, right? On the Stanford's website, you can actually find some stats on which % of accepted students have which GPA. But generally speaking, I would honestly, and this is something you might not hear a lot, but I would honestly rather you have a 3.95 and have a really standout, like amazing extracurriculars and awards portfolio than have that 4.0 and not have any extracurriculars at all. A lot of valedictorians apply to Stanford. A lot of them do get rejected. And that's simply because it's very, very hard to create a really unique extracurricular portfolio that shows a theme and have a strong GPA on top of that, right? And I'll talk about this in just a second, but that's the biggest way that the peer mentorship program will help. It looks at your strengths, looks at your passions, figures out the path of least resistance, and how can we get from point A to point B, which point B being a really stunning extracurricular portfolio, doing the least amount of extracurricular work as possible. That way you get more time for your actual GPA, taking harder coursework, things like that. So let's see, I'll answer one more question in the chat and then continue. So how much of extracurricular activities should we show? It really depends on what you have, right? And the rest of the questions I'll answer at the end of the Q&A session. But you have 10 spots on your Common App. Make the most of them. That's the biggest thing I can say. I would recommend 5 academic, 5 passion-driven ones. I'm sorry, 5 academic, 5 non-academic. All of them should be passion-driven ones. For example, for my application, I had, I think, 5 CS research-related projects and 5 like purely fun-related projects, like my YouTube channel, cooking in a restaurant, random things like that. And I think that's what they look for. They see too many academic things. Obviously, that's good and all, but I would rather you have 2 or 3 really strong academic things and explore them to the fullest. And I'm going to talk about extracurricular specifically in just a second. Yeah, here we are. So in the last slide, we saw 2 things, right? We saw extracurriculars and intellectual vitality. How do you actually showcase these things? And the best way is through passion projects. There are 4 main archetypes that we like to talk about, and I'll go through each one of them and talk about how you as parents can expose your children to them. First one is research. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot. Everyone's doing research these days, right? Fundamentally, research just means studying something new. And to be honest, it doesn't even have to be new. It just means exploring something deeper. And I think once you start looking at research with that definition, it takes a lot of the high pressure, like hi-fi stigma out of it. Research simply means you can do it with a professor, you can do it with a paid research program. All of our students do research with our actual mentors, but you can end up with publishing a research paper. You can end up with taking your research, applying it to competitions, journals, things like that. That's the first type. And the best way as parents you guys can get involved in research is, first of all, don't think about solving a problem. Think about finding a genuine problem to solve. I'm going to talk about this, and Vishnu is going to talk about this in just a second, but your essays don't flex an accomplishment, they tell a story. And the best way to tell a story, I mean, you kind of have to have this, is to have an origin story, right? So find the problem rather than finding a solution for a problem that's kind of iffy. The next thing, and that's a theme you can apply to all of these things. The next thing is volunteering. The next thing is volunteering / nonprofits. Volunteering, a lot of parents and students think about, okay, volunteering is good because it shows that you have a heart, you care about your community, you're going to be a good person. Yeah, that's great. But I think there are a lot of other ways you can show that as well. You can do research for people with skin cancer. You can work at a restaurant for free, things like that, right? And that's still showing the same thing. What I think that's special about volunteering and starting your own nonprofits is that it directly shows colleges You see an impact you see a problem within your community, and you're leveraging the tools you have to create a solution. And I think if you approach it from that point of view, it's a lot more innovative. You can be a lot more flexible with it, and you can create a really cool story behind it. Another thing, and this is especially for the parents in 9th and 10th grade here, volunteering hours, at least in our opinion, they don't mean that much. Getting the Presidential Congressional Award, like that's great and all, but don't volunteer for the sake of getting hours. Like I said earlier, find a problem that aligns with your theme. For example, I had my theme of cooking, right? But at the start, I used to volunteer at hospitals. I used to volunteer picking up trash at beaches. I used to do a bunch of different things, right? And yeah, I mean, I felt fulfilled doing that. But ultimately, I've started volunteering at a soup kitchen to keep with my same food and cooking theme. And I think that's far more important. So my advice for parents in 9th and 10th grade would be, instead of applying to a bunch of different volunteering opportunities just for the sake of volunteering, talk to your child, find one that really aligns with their theme, and just work at one nonprofit or just work at one volunteering org. That's the best thing that you can do, at least in our opinion. The next one is technical projects. And this is the most like vague umbrella term one. Technical projects are pretty much any independent project that you do that showcases some aspect of leadership and technical ability. Technical ability doesn't necessarily have to be academic. Sports, instruments, singing, dance, things like that, those can all count. Additionally, independent projects as well, right? Developing AI projects, developing chemistry pre-med projects, passing a local law into Congress. All of these things count. And this is where the peer mentorship program will help. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then the last part is wildcard experiences. And this is my favorite part. It's the wow factor, like as like a lot of parents say. Like I said earlier, a few slides ago, they're only going to be spending a few minutes on your application, the committee head part, right? So yes, you're going to have this portfolio of a bunch of different things, but what's the one thing that you're going to have that makes them go, holy crap, I need this student at my school? That's the wow factor. And this is something that generally we have one or two things in your application, but something that really stands out. For example, one of the things I did in high school, still staying on the same cooking food theme, was that I reached out to a bunch of celebrity chefs, people like Gordon Ramsay, people like Vikas Khanna, Sanjeev Kapoor, things on that angle. And I reached out to a bunch of these people, and I was actually able to do an internship for my winter break at a Michelin star restaurant in New York City. And in my Common App, the main essay that you wrote, I actually wrote about the value of like spending 10 minutes on cutting one cauliflower, the value of fine dining, attention to detail. And when they read that essay, it's like, wow, this is something pretty weird, unique, quirky that they do, but it helps them remember you, right? Your main goal is you want them to remember you by. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think now we can take a break to learn a little bit more about the GradAchiever platform, and then we can go back to talk a little bit more about AdmitMate's programs and then answer the Q&A.
Cool. This is pretty interesting. Thanks, Halap and Vishnu. So we have Ritu, who's going to be giving a demo of GradAchiever platform. Ritu, on to you, please.
Thank you so much, Kavita. Let me share my screen and let me know if you can see.
Yes.
Perfect. So thanks, Alap and Vishnu, for sharing such insightful information with our audience today. Hey everyone, this is Ritu here, and I'm one of the member of GradAchiever core team and a mother of high schooler who is about to begin her college admission journey. And as Kavita stated earlier, that we have built this free platform for high school students, parents, tutor, counselors seeking or sharing college admission related information. This platform is fully equipped with many useful college admission related resources and information, and providing all of it at one place. So let me give you a quick walkthrough of our website. So let's start with the events. You can find many college-related events here. You can post, you can create your own events, even you can share with others if you are aware of any such event, and it will be shared with all our GradAchiever community members. Apart from that, we have groups. So you can join these groups specific to your area of interest, or even you can create your own group related to your schools, your college, and invite other members to have a very focused discussions with your circle and with your members. Next, we have a members section where you can connect with other grad achiever, graduate community members, introduce yourself and start the discussion from there. We have a very important section, which is opportunities, and it's a useful resource if you are looking for any scholarship, volunteering opportunity. We gather these opportunities from various sources and make it available to you at one place. So one place to go for looking for any volunteering or internship or summer programs. Even you can post your own opportunity here, share it with others. As I said earlier, like this platform is for community and by community members. Next, we have a resource section, very useful section. I would ask everyone to bookmark it. Here you can find various information like, the blogs related to college admissions. You can find our previous podcast recordings, which a lot of people ask, like where we can go and listen the earlier recorded podcast. You can find our counselor and tutor section. Here, to get all the details, even you can share the feedback with the other community members if you have liked their services. So you get to hire any counselor and you have any specific feedback, please share it. We would really appreciate sharing the feedback with the rest of the community members. Next, we have a course selection. Right? This is very useful for students who want to pursue their career in specific direction, but really don't know what are the courses they should look for or they should choose in their 4 years high school journey. So by selecting it, it really laid out 4-year plan for you, even like right elective, so you can make the informed decision. So just choose your interest, and it just shows you what are the courses the student should take and what are the elective in accordance to that interest, career interest, right? Then we have a GPA calculator. Yes. You also have like this UC specific GPA calculator. Since UCs calculate, as Alap mentioned, they calculate GPA differently than the rest of the colleges. It takes into account the difficulty of courses you have taken and assign extra points for honors, AP, and transferable college courses. Then we have a My Plan section. This section refers to outline the courses that high school students will take to complete the necessary requirement for high school graduations. So 4-year plan allows students to personalize their high school schedule, incorporate classes that will lead to their future college majors and career, and ensure that they have graduated from high school on time. So in grade 8 and 9, student can start planning their high school courses. In 10 through 12, students review their graduation plan, and at least once a year, make sure they are tracking it here. And last but not least, the career quiz. The quiz allows students to explore their interests, strength, passion, helping them gain a deeper understanding on themselves and what drives them. This quiz introduces students to wide career cluster. You can see this, and expose them to understand like their interest, their career path, which they may not have figured it out yet. So I would suggest to start with it as soon as possible to understand your career path. It can serve as a foundation for education learning. Please follow us on the LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Also join our WhatsApp Grad Achiever community to receive on-time information related to our events and podcast. Also, we would love to hear the feedback related to this platform on how we can improve and add more meaningful resources to it. So thank you so much for your attention. Back to you, Kavita.
Thank you, Ritu. Again, just to reiterate, somebody asked us a question if this is a paid website. No, this is a completely free website for all of you. And the goal of the core Grad Achiever team is to create a platform which brings all the parents and high school students into one forum, because right now there is nothing out there. We all end up joining multiple Facebook groups, trying to follow multiple threads, so it can get overwhelming. That's why the whole goal was to create one dedicated platform for you all. So it has been created for you all. Use the platform, share with everybody. Like we said, we are completely running this free, and the whole intent is to bring the community together to help the much needed group of students, high schoolers, to help them aid into their dream colleges. With that said, without much further ado, we'd like to hand it over back to Alap and Vishnu, because they have been sharing such an excellent piece of information. Take over, guys.
Awesome. And yeah, thank you for the demo. I think it was very, very helpful.
Yeah, I wish I knew of this resource when I was in high school.
Like the one-stop shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So quickly, I want to take you guys through the different programs we have here at AdmitMate. And the first program is for students in 8th through 11th grade. It's called the Peer Mentorship Program. And the idea here is that students are matched with IB Plus mentors who share their academic interests, passions, and goals for personalized college admissions mentorship. And the idea here is, traditionally, when students go through their high school journey and they're looking for resources to help them with getting into college, the first thing they do is, okay, they get a college counselor, but then they also need someone to help them with research. So then that's an additional third-party service. And then, they need someone to help them write their essays. And then sometimes they even hire people to help them, create nonprofits. And essentially, the current solutions are too fractured. So what Alap and I wanted to do is to basically create a one-stop shop for everything you need to boost your college portfolio. And so there's only one source for all of this, right? Working with your peer mentor, because they've gone through all of these things. They've done the research that you want to do. They have created the projects that you want to create, and they can help you with the general college counseling mentorship as well, right? And so that's the idea with this peer mentorship platform. And Alap, if there's anything you want to add regarding the specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the main reason why me and Vishnu created this was, I briefly talked about this at the start. We were the guinea pigs, right? Our parents were first-generation immigrants from India, and they had no idea what holistic meant, what all these different components were, all these things. So it was a ton of trial and error, to be completely honest. And me and Vishnu were both pretty like headstrong on the fact that in high school, we want to like enjoy high school for what it is, right? We don't want to purely do academics. We both had very unique interests, just like I had mine for cooking, he had his for philosophy. And we wanted to figure out, how do we bridge this gap, right? So the first thing that we sort of accidentally stumbled into or realized throughout our application process, and we started very late. We pretty much only ramped up in 11th grade. Is spike-driven extracurriculars, right? Something where you can make academics fun by exploring your interests through academics. A lot of cooking plus CS projects for me, a lot of physics plus philosophy projects for Vishnu, things like that. And that's one of the fundamental like pillars of the peer mentorship program, right? We're going to match you with someone who not only shares your major, but actually shares your interests, someone you can bond with as a person. Think of this as like an older brother who's just a few years older, or older sister, who's been through your shoes and actually understands the landscape you're in, right? And I'll give an example of this, right? We had a student reach out to us a while back, and she was a pre-law student. And she wanted to figure out, okay, I worked with my counselor and I created this really amazing idea for a bill that I want to pass into Congress. But how do I actually do this? How do I actually pass the bill? She came to us and we were like, okay, while me and Vishnu don't exactly know how to pass a bill into Congress, it's a great idea. How do we do that? So we literally matched her with somebody from the same area as her who passed several bills into their local Congress. Somebody who knew the infrastructure, knew which forms to file, knew who to talk to, and within months, that bill was literally from her computer into the local Congress. And that's just one of several examples, right? The students I started working with, they're all students who liked cooking, who liked computer science. The students that we match mentors with, it's very similar, right? Another thing, like I talked about earlier, is the student-specific perspectives and the major specific advice, right? I think I talked about this earlier. I'm not going to harp too much on this, but it's very easy to skip the trial and error, learn from somebody who's done the extracurriculars you want, and actually learn from a student who's studying your major. I think that's very, very helpful. And I'll give an example of this, right? Here's like a quick before and after. So we worked with a student. She entered in 9th grade, and she was interested in computer science and cooking. She was actually one of my first students. She did the Berkeley Entrepreneurship Camp, and she had a great GPA and good coursework. And then just within a few months, we were able to file a 501c3 nonprofit for food insecurity solutions. We did data science research on cardiovascular health. We started a YouTube channel where she just showcased recipes for like forgotten vegetables, like the stems of cauliflowers, the peels of carrots, the beetroot skins, things like that, which was very, very exciting in the community. And she also created an app to help recommend soup kitchens what kind of food to serve when, depending on the amount of lines that they have, all within 9 months. And how is this possible? It's because these are very similar to the extracurriculars I did in high school, right? So we're almost reusing it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're almost reusing the extracurriculars that all your mentors have done because they're so similar to what you want to do, right? And we tweak them slightly, and you can pretty much have like a very, very big head start.
Yeah. And the last thing we wanted to cover here are the main types of essays that you're going to have to write for your college application. And the reason why this is important is because essays are the best ways to showcase your values as a person. And ultimately, values, along with that sort of theme, is what these college admissions officers really care about, because your values inform why you're pursuing that theme in your college application, right? The value is the fundamental why, what is motivating you to do all of these things, and then the theme is the next layer up. But yeah, so your supplemental essays are the best way to showcase your values, which are the foundation of your college application. And so the first type of essay is the personal statement. This is the essay that goes out to every single university, except for the UCs, but the UCs essentially have their own version of it. So effectively it goes out to every university. And this is one essay in which you don't talk about really your academics or your professional experience or anything like that. It's purely about who you are, what motivates you, maybe some challenges you faced in the past. There are many different versions of what a personal statement could look like, but the idea is that it's trying to show who you are at your core. And I would encourage you guys to read some personal statement examples online to see all of the different ways in which they could manifest. The next main type of essay is the why major essay, and it's talking about fundamentally, why do you want to study this major, right? Why do you care about studying this major? What does it enable you to do? How is it connected to one of your core values? And then the next type of essay is the why us essay. And it's talking about, why do you want to study at this university specifically? You know, each university, if you go through their website, if you go through, you know, all of their scheduled programming and talks, each university cares about different stuff. And you want to establish an alignment between your values and the university's values. So that's the why us essay. And the last type of essay is the community essay. And in the community essay, what you're going to be doing is talking about, you know, how have you contributed to a community in the past? What values has that fostered within you? And how will you be giving a similar contribution to the college community, given that you've gotten certain values through contributing to another community in the past? And yeah, those are the main essay types. I went through that kind of fast so we could have a little bit of time for Q&A, but yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is the last AdmitMate program. It's the senior Kickstart program. And yeah, I'll go through this a little bit faster again so that we have time for Q&A. But the idea is that you'll be applying to all of the colleges in your senior year with a student in your major who has actually gotten into your dream schools, right? So it's experience-based insights from someone who's actually gotten into the schools that you're applying to currently in your major. And yeah, we do everything. We revise your essays, brainstorm them, develop your college list, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and you guys can ask any questions now if you have them.
Yeah, I think just until the questions roll in, I'll just add a little bit more about the Senior Kickstart program. I guess the program in general. The biggest piece of advice I can give is that you want to tell a story with your essays, right? I'm going to use computer science as an example. You can obviously write an essay about developing an app, which all frameworks you use, languages, models you import, and things like that. And yeah, that's very impressive. It shows that you're a good computer science student. However, your admissions officer won't know what any of these things are there, right? They're most likely going to be humanities majors. And so what we really focus on is telling a story throughout the process. What was the origin of the problem? How did you solve it? How did your view of computer science change as you started solving it? And maybe that's why you want to study it in the future. Another thing is, in the AdmitMate peer mentorship program, you're going to have access to all our senior resources as well. So as a ninth grader, you're going to be able to see all of our Stanford, Chicago, Penn, Columbia, all these top school essays, and you can actually see what kind of essays that the school specifically like and start reverse engineering your profile. And that's something that we do in a lot of our meetings as well.
Yeah, and we had our first question come in, which is, you know, I've heard that colleges don't look at final grades in senior year. All they look for is courses. Is that true? And that is kind of true, kind of not true, right? So if you do an early decision, that means that you're applying to colleges before you've received any grades in your senior year. And in that case, all they can really base it on is your courses, your admission. But if you apply regular decision, then they're seeing your first semester senior grades. But then in second semester, right, after you've received your letters of admission, if you do really badly in your second semester, the college can actually rescind your offer of admission, right? So they can take it back because they say that, okay, in second semester you stopped caring and you did really badly, they can take back your offer of admission. So that's just to say, don't take senior year as a joke. Obviously, the college is not going to rescind you, even if you go from a straight A student to you know, getting a bunch of B's. But if you start getting C's, then you're in a danger zone. So yeah, that's the answer to the first question. The second question is, how much do we charge for a 10th grader to guide to college admission? The price for a 10th grader, right, any non-senior, is $2,500 for 15 hours. And we can send, you know, more payment details later. the general timeline is that you fill out an application, which we will paste shortly. Then you will get a free initial consultation with your best fit mentor, right? So you'll get to meet them, and you'll also get to talk to Alip and I to learn a little bit more about the details of the program and the vision that we have for your student based off of their application. And then you get to choose to move forward with your mentor if you like the fit. Yeah. So if you're interested, Alip, if you want to paste the application form in the chat.
Yes, I got this application form. And yeah, so it's a year-by-year thing. And in like, I don't think we talked about this specifically. We'll send an email out. But peer mentorship program, 15 sessions with your mentor spread across the year, however often you want. And it's unlimited email support, unlimited access to like all our templates, including all our senior resources as well as recorded videos by me and Vishnu explaining how to write essays and explaining how to how holistic admissions works, how to break into research, general things like that. And we'll send all the information shortly.
Yeah. And the next question is, also on the screen, Alip is pasting a QR code for a WhatsApp group where we will be sharing any other events that we're doing, any other talks. So if you want, feel free to sign up. Alip and I are also active on it, so you can ask us any questions that you have on WhatsApp, and we'll be happy to answer it. We're also planning to do, a daily short video series where people ask us any questions and we'll answer them. So yeah, please feel free to join that group using the QR code above. Another question is, how do students log volunteer hours, or how do they prove it? So generally there's a form that you need to get from your school, and it's to be signed by the organizer of the volunteering opportunity. So that's generally how it's done. If there's no real organizer, then it depends from activity to activity. Sometimes there's an app, say you're picking up trash or something, the app will validate it. But it's really on a case-by-case basis how that works. Yeah. Another question is, my daughter is interested in classical dance and hip-hop dance. How can she be unique in these extracurricular activities? So I'll help you answer this question, but this general principle will apply to, anybody who has a particular passion and wants to be unique in it, right? So may I ask to the person who asked that question, what is your daughter's academic interest? What is she interested in majoring in potentially?
She's a ninth grader. She's a little bit in confusion whether she can take either engineering or pre-med as a major.
Okay.
Yeah. She's exploring still how to which to take major as a medicine or engineering.
Sure. Yeah. So let me think off of the pre-med front, right? So something that a lot of our students have done in the past who are interested in sports and medicine is they've done research on, certain types of sport injuries that you contract in sports and how to deal with them, right? And you can do similar research at the intersection of dance and medicine, right? Are there certain types of injuries that dancers face disproportionately, and how do you account for them? That's one idea. Another thing that you could do is the idea is just to think along the lines of how does dance intersect with your major, and also you don't necessarily have to think of projects that are in the intersection, but you want to have projects that show leadership and have a genuine impact. And so you could for example have your daughter teach dance classes to students in middle school, and that could be a cool way to show leadership. So those are a couple of ideas. Feel free to connect with us if you need any more help, and we'd be happy to help you along that line.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
I think one more question we had was, do you help with summer program opportunities and enrollment as well? And yeah, absolutely. So just like we'll help with applying to colleges, we'd help with applying to summer programs. This involves making a list of a bunch of different summer programs that can fulfill what you want in a summer program, and then applying them, writing the essays, revising the essays, doing the iterations all over. It's just like applying to college. So we'll definitely help with that. Additionally, you'll have access to all our summer program sample essays. Our students have gotten into Cosmos, UCSB Research Mentorship Program, MIT Beaverworks, programs like this. And so you'll have access to a lot of sample essays from students like that are your age that have actually worked in the past. So that's another thing we'd help with.
Yeah. Another question we have is how to connect with college professors to work on your research and ideas. And a sort of cool thing about our program is that since all of our students are current undergrads, they can actually connect you directly to the professors that they are working with, right? So for example, one of our students was interested in undertaking a biology research project, and they actually got connected to the same lab that their mentor was working in, underneath a professor who was doing research that that student was interested in. And the mentor literally brought the student onto that lab and gave them a warm connection. So the university's resources that are available to the mentor are then made available to the student. And that makes research a lot more accessible. And another way is pursuing an independent research project with a mentor's guidance. And that's another completely valuable way to do research, especially in younger grades like 8th grade, 9th grade, and even 10th grade. It's very difficult to convince a professor that you have the skills necessary to contribute to their lab. So the best way is to do an independent research project first, show them that you've done this in the past, and then you can approach a professor to work in their lab.
Another question. Oh yeah. Another question we had in the chat was, let's see, how can somebody get a head start in 8th grade if you're interested in climate change, biology, math, and science, math and data, math and data? And yeah, the first thing would be we'd match you with somebody who has those exact same interests, right? Somebody who's studying biology with an interest in climate change, math, and data. And it's based on the skill level of the child, obviously, right? In 8th and 9th grade, we'd do more, I call them developmental projects that are not super technical in nature, like a heavy AI or machine learning project, or I guess a wet lab project in this case, but a project that's a very good introduction and will help you develop the skills to do these projects later down the line, right? So within the first year, you'd create 2 or 3 different climate change biology projects, right? Some of them you might we'll apply to like internships at like the Stanford School of Sustainability, other big names in that field. And we'd also connect you to the right people to actually help you excel in this.
Yeah. And another high level question is, are there initiatives that are impressive to colleges that are not just starting nonprofits? And the answer to that is, do not constrain yourself to just think about nonprofits. Some of the most impressive things that students have done have been much wider in scope, right? So it doesn't have to be just a nonprofit. It can be any sort of solution to a problem that you see in the world that is completely viable. Yeah, so don't just think about nonprofits. Think a lot broader. Yeah. And Olive, do you want to answer the question about how many students there are as our mentors?
Yeah, so we have 2 co-founders, obviously me and Vishnu, and we're, I guess, in the admin. And then we have over 50 mentors across a bunch of different fields. We really believe in a 1-to-1 ratio. So it's just you're gonna be your mentor's only student, your mentor is gonna be your mentor, right? And so we have over 50 mentors across a bunch of different fields. Additionally, if you have a really niche or unique interest, we delve deeper into our college community, right? Between me and Vishnu, we know thousands of different students at a lot of these top universities, right? For example, one child had an interest in forensic psychology and juvenile reform. And we were actually able to match them with somebody who literally studied juvenile reform and criminal psychology in high school and did a lot of projects. So they're able to like get out the gate super fast.
Yeah. And to the person who said that their daughter is interested in biomed, what research projects do we suggest? can I ask you, what are some of the things that your daughter is passionate about outside of school? You can feel free to unmute and just say it in the meeting, or you can
Like
type it
text
in the
in the
chat.
chat.
Yeah.
Answer. Yeah. So another question we had was
Hi there.
oh, perfect.
Hello. Yeah, so I posted the question. My daughter is interested in doing the biomed pathway. She's currently in 8th grade. And you were talking about research projects earlier. So is there any specific research projects that she should do that would help with her college application?
Yeah, so what are some of her extracurricular passions, like outside of academics? What is she interested in?
She's in the school team for basketball, and she does volleyball as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't catch. What grade was she in again?
8th grade.
8th grade. So I would say it's probably best to pursue like a pretty basic independent research project, especially in 8th grade, just to get a little bit of experience, because you know, the idea in 8th grade is not to do groundbreaking research, of course. The idea is just to wet your feet a little bit and understand, is this something that the student is going to enjoy or not? So depending on the, you know, the skills that your student has, maybe you could do some computational research at the intersection of sports and medicine. But something that I think would be cool is, since she's on the school basketball team, she could think of some sort of a, you know, some sort of a basic survey on a pain point or something like that to ask the other members of the basketball team, and provide a sort of rudimentary analysis of that and present it to the administrators of the basketball team to institute some sort of a change. I think that would be a lot more of a reasonable ask of an 8th grader than to pursue a research project, if that makes sense.
Yeah, she's also won a lot in the HOSA competitions at the national level as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think that I think that research is something where you need, especially when you're doing independent research, you need a good deal of like computational ability, like some coding skills and stuff like that. So I would say either wait until like 10th grade-ish to pursue a proper research project. And I think earlier on, it's a lot better to do a lot more impact projects where you're dealing directly with people and trying to make a change here and there in your community. Yeah, that's what I would say. But depending on your child's interests, we can obviously think of something. It's hard to, in 5 minutes, to talk about that. So feel free to connect with us if you have any other questions.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then in a quick time check here. Thank you, Vishnu and Ala, for staying over. I think we have one more question we can take before we close the session.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I got one that says, is the 11th or 10th grade too late to join your team for building activities? And absolutely not. I think I talked about this a little bit earlier, but until 10th grade or until 11th grade, me and Vishnu pretty much just played tennis and like we cooked and we like hung out, had fun, right? I think 11th grade is when we really turn on that switch. So it's definitely possible, especially in 11th grade. And for specifically in 11th grade, we'd focus on, we have one more year, right? So we'd focus on building 2 to 3 or maybe 3 to 4 really high impact, low effort extracurriculars that align with your theme and really impress colleges. And I think just working with somebody who's already created these extracurriculars just makes the process so much faster.
Yeah, but also we do recommend starting earlier than 11th grade. It caused a lot of unneeded stress for Olive and I and our families, because we started quite late. But yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time to hear our presentation. You have our contact, you have our website, and yeah, please feel free to reach out if there are any questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Cool. Thanks again, Alap and Vishnu. Very
Thank you,
helpful
guys.
session. We look forward to partnering with you guys to bring in more intuitive subjects for this podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of traction from our audience. Again, appreciate everyone, those of you taking time on a Saturday morning.
Thank you, Gratachiever team, for hosting us. This was once again an amazing collaboration.
Cool.
Amazing. Yeah.
Have a good one, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.